Hi, welcome to The Healing View. I'm Barbara, and I'm here with my partners Laura and Judy and Sharon. And our hope is that we will inspire you with your health, wellness, and happiness by interviewing people who will share their beliefs, their personal stories, and their lessons learned about their healing journeys and its impact on others. So get ready to learn, laugh, and have fun with The Healing View.
All right. Thank you so much, Barbara, and welcome, partners. And I want to welcome our first guest, Doug Matzke. Hi, Doug.
Hey, thanks for having me here today. That's
okay. Let me just read a bio for Doug. Dr. Matzke is a prolific scientist, researcher, and presenter in his areas of expertise in limits of computation, hyperdimensional mathematics, neurocomputing, quantum computing, real intelligence, and metaphysics. During his 45-year career, he was chairman of 2 PsychComp 92 and 94 workshops, contributed to 15 disclosed patents with 8 granted, has published over 50 papers and presentations, and earned a PhD in quantum computing. Doug has adopted the moniker of Quantum Doug. Love it. Because he combines these deep reality subjects as the source science behind his quantum mind-based model of humanity. Right. Well, that's a mouthful, Doug.
Yeah.
So, where do we begin?
Yes, and what does it mean?
All of that is really about who we are, so
Right.
as humans, so that's why it's important.
Right. And you've also written a book, and it's not published yet, will be published in 2020.
Yep.
And it's Deep Reality. You co-authored with William A. Tiller, who is a renowned scientist as well.
Yeah.
So anyhow, we have read the excerpt from the book cover. We haven't read the book. But some of our questions, first of all, let's go back to you becoming a scientist.
Right.
And what happened, or what incident in your life inspired you to become a scientist?
Yeah, well, I've always been taking things apart, not always putting them back together again, when I was a kid. But I always wanted to know how things worked. And early on, I realized that things like prana and subtle energy and how humans work is the biggest mystery. And I think everybody's working on that problem right now. They're trying to do artificial intelligence, they're trying to make computers as smart as humans, self-driving cars. And so I have a little bit different take on that because everybody believes the brain is a computer. And if you have that philosophy, then you take the view that they currently are with classical computers and AI. But I don't believe that. I believe the brain is an antenna and that our consciousness is bigger than just the brain. And that opens the door to the kinds of things that you all do at the
Right.
At your center, yeah.
Well, I've known Doug since way in the mid-90s.
Yeah.
And so throughout, we've worked on websites together. We've done the work together with our mentor, Deborah Singleton, over the years. And so Doug is familiar with our work and
Absolutely.
recently came into our new office. And so there's a nice compatibility that happens between what you're saying and what we believe in and how we do our work.
Absolutely.
So that's why we have you here.
Well, great. I really feel appreciated being here today. Many people believe, plus classical people who believe that, hey, everything's classical, electromagnetics and stuff like that, that there's no room in the world for prana and subtle energy. And part of the problem, of course, of that, as a scientist, you can't measure it. Well, most of science today is about measuring things that are really hard to measure. And most things are measurable only statistically. For example, the placebo effect is, you can't measure it because it isn't something. It's a statistical effect, the fact that you have a placebo effect. And so most of physics is about statistical deviations that says that there's something there, but we don't understand. We can't measure it directly. We can only measure it indirectly. So subtle energy and prana, as I prefer the term prana over subtle energy, is because it's probably related to quantum mechanics. And you can't measure quantum mechanics either. You can do things with quantum mechanics, but you can't measure it directly. So that's how they tie together.
Does that mean we can't measure it now? Will we be able to measure it in the
I
future?
don't believe we'll ever be able to measure it. But humans are part of the same infrastructure that prana is. And so therefore, we can directly interact with it, both to detect it and affect it. And that's what all of the metaphysics research is all about, is proving that humans do have an effect on things that they shouldn't have an effect on. So.
Well, and if I could ask, and we might want to put a picture of the book cover up, just, while we're on the topic of the book. But in part of the cover, you talk about real intelligence, and as it relates to quantum computing, I would like to understand that a little bit better in layman's terms as much as possible.
Well, once you start studying what quantum computing is all about, they've now shown 25 years ago already that quantum computing is exponentially more powerful than any kind of classical computer. In fact, everybody's trying to actually build a physical quantum computer right now, and they use the term quantum supremacy to talk about that says this computation using a quantum computer cannot ever be solved with a classical computer. So that's where they are 25 years after they prove mathematically that quantum computing was more powerful than classical computers. And now they're actually ready to measure that. And so the point is that the way that that's possible is through those big words, hyperdimensional math, right? That this hyperdimensional math means it doesn't fit in our brain. The hyperdimensional math is not in the three-dimensional space of our brain. It's somewhere else. And where is that? It's in an abstract space. And that's the space of prana, and that's the space of thought. So
one of the things that we do, Doug, is we work with people. They don't necessarily have to be in our office.
Absolutely.
We can work with people at a distance, no matter where they are on the planet, and maybe beyond.
Yeah.
And so this sounds like that's exactly what you're saying, only in my terms, we can do distance healing.
Yes.
Because we can work with the energy of that person no matter where. And that person doesn't even have to be present.
Absolutely.
But they have to give us the permission to tune into that in order for that to happen.
Right. There was a famous experiment a gentleman named Dean Radin, who's in California, did, where he actually showed that a human could directly affect the twin slit experiment from quantum mechanics, which is an important experiment because it says consciousness can directly impact quantum mechanics. Okay? Well, the only way that's possible is not through any force that we know about it. It's through directly interacting with the quantum state. And I think that's what you all do when you're doing your healing, is that your prana, your quantum state, your intention, which is bigger than your physical body. It's the aura that people who can see auras see, is that you can't represent that physically. You just think of this as this egg of light filaments, okay? And what are those light filaments? Well, they're the prototypes of what photons are, which is why we visualize them that way. So there's a math and physics that we can use to talk about all that. And those don't exist in 3 dimensions. So therefore, they are not bound by 3-dimensional constraints. So.
And we call that unseen forces.
Yeah, absolutely. And non-locality.
That's our definition.
And, yeah, absolutely. And there's non-localness too associated with it because it's bigger than just 3 dimensions. So,
right.
Yeah. So.
Interesting.
So that's a lot of those topics are we've woven together into this book that I'm writing, and hopefully it'll be out early next year.
So is your book for the layperson? Can we all read it and
That
understand
is the
it?
goal.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Somebody who reads about Einstein sees E equals mc squared. Well, that's the level of equations that we have in the book, is that we have some equations, but it's not like you have to be an advanced math person to be able to read the book. We just say, here's the nomenclature that people use for people who want to see it. But it's all in plain English, and the goal is to make it accessible with everybody. So.
What were some of the hardest parts of getting that book written for you?
It's the motivation to keep working on it, knowing that the universe wanted me to write this book. If you see the path, the journey that I took to write this book, it was like kind of like a charmed unfolding of the book. And the universe kept making sure all the doors were open so that I would do this, including working with the famous Bill Tiller, and he's a famous researcher and writer and published author in this area, and we agreed to do this book together. And his work is like I'm standing on the shoulder of a giant with that. And so, plus working full time while writing the book to keep me motivated to keep writing the book in spite of normal busy life. So that was the challenge.
So for the layperson, can you just explain what quantum computing actually is?
Right. If you go to build computers smaller and smaller and smaller, which is called reductionist thinking, eventually you get to the state where they're so small that they're below what we call atoms and like photons. And in that state, you no longer have classical physics anymore. And the physicists in the world have been struggling with what quantum mechanics is. Quantum, that's what quantized mean. Everything's quantized at the smallest level. How that fits in with physics. And they discovered 100 years ago the laws are completely different down there. And now, in 1994, then they showed that difference leads to this exponential power of computing. So I believe humans would be extinct if we weren't quantum computers, because quantum computers are exponentially smarter than classical computers. And so we evolved because we are tapping into the supercomputer of quantum computing. So.
Interesting.
Okay, thank you. My science background stopped at Newtonian science, and so this is all sort of brain expanding. Brain challenging, expanding.
Well, that's why it's hard to describe in an elevator speech. That's why you have to write a whole book about it, which is why I wrote the book.
Okay, and so bringing all of that, combining again with kind of the healing work that we do, and that you've experienced that work
Absolutely.
many, many times over the years with us in many different ways. What's the bridge and the combination of it all for you? How do you put all of that together in your life with everything?
Right. Once you realize that essentially we're eternal because our mind isn't in our brain. And so there is a representation for thoughts.
I have to interrupt you for a second.
Sure.
So where is the mind?
It's nowhere and everywhere. And it's no when and any when, right? Because those two ideas assume that the mind is like in a location, but our mind isn't in a location. It defines space, it defines time, just like quantum physics defines empty space. It's full of quantum foam. So our mind is the same stuff that the universe is made of. And because of that, I use the term source science to talk about that not only it's the source of mind, but it's also the source of everything else in the universe. And it's the same stuff that creates both. So hopefully that language will help you identify that it's more primitive than anything else. We're like part of the operating system of the quantum computer that runs the universe. And so our mind can we're like the source code of the universe. We can directly manipulate anything in the universe in this big quantum simulation that is our universe. So
I like to also think of how our heart is connected to everything you've just said, and the power of the mind in the heart, and the power of that blending in with everything you've said.
Absolutely, absolutely. There's a definite connection between this field, this aura, the prana, and the physical body. And a lot of people are like chronically holding their breath. They have sort of like the minimum flow of prana connected with their physical body.
We know that.
Yeah.
Because we work with them all the time.
And so the point is a lot of the techniques I'm explore and teach people and stuff like that, which is the same thing you all are doing, is how to build the prana so it's more in the body. And so now it's like heaven on earth. It's like the best of both worlds. It's your supermind ideas and your prana and your intuition, and you're interacting with your body at the same time. You don't have to ascend to escape the physical reality. No, we have the connection of the two here and now. So that's what we want to go. You know, we can all be just brilliant people if we connected to our higher self all the time. And that's what you all do with your healing and with your day. You know, you already live in that area. So
It's not easy. It's not easy to get people to go there, and it's not easy for us as practitioners to move step by step through that process, as you know.
Yeah.
So you've got 2 grandchildren, 2 new grandchildren.
I have 1 grandchildren and another one on the way.
And so thinking about your work and our work, how do you see the future with those grandchildren, and what differences might you see in how they live their lives?
Well, when my first grandson was born, about 7 weeks ago, I gave a book called Quantum Computing for Babies to my wife to bring so the grandchild was being read this book to him. So the point is, every child that's growing up, and we call these crystal children and those kinds of labels for these kids, they're just going to be born into the world where they assume that we're already quantum computers, you know, and they know about quantum computing from the beginning the same way our children knew about the internet when they were born. So we don't have to unlearn. They won't have to unlearn anything. Okay, they won't have to unlearn the fact that the world isn't really a classical worldview. It's a quantum mechanical worldview. So.
The rest of us are going to have to catch up with those babies.
Yeah, absolutely.
I believe that.
Everybody, there's this whole kind of, just like the internet, everybody had this internet. Everybody became used to computers. You know, you had to program your DVR, you know, and set your time on your DVR. You had your grandchild do it, right? Because they knew how to do this. Well, the next group of children are just going to know how to do quantum computing, know how to do healing, know how to do intention, know how to do all of this stuff that we having
struggled. We've struggled.
Yeah, we struggled because it's against our worldview that we've been raised up with. So changing the worldview to be this new modern information-oriented worldview is really the key. So
interesting.
yeah.
So in working with Dr. Tiller, did you have to travel a lot to see him? Tell us a little bit about working with him and how that.
Yeah, he's a prolific writer. He has several books out already and some websites. And so I went and visited him several times during this process to interact with him, and he sent me material as well for the book that he had. That was, some of it was pre-published already, but then I wove it into a story as if he and I were having a conversation about it. So it's this dialogue between the two of us, which makes it much more accessible. It's not like a lecture; it's more like eavesdropping in on this kind of conversation between the two of us.
How you integrate your science background with your personal life and your spiritual development.
Right. Well, I've done a lot of healing work as well. I'm hanging out with you guys all these years, these ladies, and Deborah, and but I also have done other quantum healing modalities. You know, some balancing systems, and I have developed my own techniques for building energy, and I even used them with the chorus I sing with to build the energy for the whole chorus, to connect the whole chorus. So, so I look for opportunities every day to connect these spiritual ideas that we would label as spiritual ideas, but they're really source science ideas, that this is who we are, and we can affect the water by how we think. You know, the messages in the water stuff from the What the Bleep movie, you know, and in fact, Dr. Tiller was in that movie, What the Bleep. And so all of these ideas are becoming more accessible, and hopefully the book will say, here is a model that ties them all together that's not easy to dismiss anymore. You know, that the critics can't dismiss it anymore because it's pervasive and it's accessible to everybody. So.
Well, okay, so to kind of bring this to a close, you mentioned chorus a minute ago. So as kind of a wrapping statement, you want to just tell us a few words about what that is?
Yeah, I mean, your friend Deborah, we contracted with her to teach us some of these techniques of energy balancing and building of energy so that the whole chorus would be more of a one mind and be one mind with the audience. And we believe that we succeeded in doing that because we had some results that were unexpected. And it was quite interesting because Deborah loved it, of course, and our director loved it, and the team of a dozen guys who were involved with it loved it. And so we had quite an impact on some results that we got in contest as a result of that, we think.
And this was a national contest, right?
Yeah, exactly.
First place?
Our chorus does get first place a lot, yes.
Yes.
So
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah.
yeah. So
Very good.
yeah, so
Well, thank you.
yeah, it's
thank
really
you.
good to have you all here, and thanks for inviting me for one of your first sessions here on the Healing View. Yeah,
Yeah, thank you. It's
Well-
wonderful to have you.
yeah.
Great. So thank you for joining us for the Healing View. And so this is Laura, Barbara, Judy, and Sharon, and our guest Doug signing off with a final thought to breathe and feel your feet.